What's up out there? If it looks like I'm reading from a script, it's because I am, and I don't have a monitor in front of me. I have it sitting off to the side. So unfortunately, this is what it is. But welcome to the channel. We've grown quite a bit over the last year, so this will be something new to quite a few of you. Starting back in 2015 and every year since, I have done a Halloween horror movie marathon that typically starts on October 1st and runs through the 31st, although I have been starting these in mid to late September lately. This has taken various forms depending on what forum I was on, but it's ranged from freeform list to themed list to what I do now, which is more of a treasure hunt type list. These days I follow the rules that Cinemonster sets out on the Letterboxd website, which typically involves X number of countries and decades and various other criteria that changes each year. What I like about this style of list is it is more of a treasure hunt. I love horror movies, and digging into the niche type movies or foreign stuff I've never heard of is very cool. In 2020, I started to make YouTube videos to chronicle my journey for that season, and in 2021 I tried but got far too busy IRL and barely even finished the marathon itself. I did finish them, but barely. But here we are in 2022, ready to go again. So the basic idea of a Halloween horror movie marathon is to watch 31 movies in 31 days. Cinemonster sets the rules to allow starting on September 15th, so I've been using that as my starting point to either allow for IRL things going on or to shove more movies in. With all that out of the way, let's dive into this year's criteria. There are some things that are always the same. First off, one film can meet the multiple criteria. It's always that way. There must be 31 films. I left my list unfinished for now because there are a lot of older movies coming, or a lot of movies coming to the theater. So I'll fill in here and there through that or streaming services. Worst to worst, I have some other purchases that I've made just laying around from years past. There needs to be 6 countries. My list has 7. I have Germany, US, UK, Canada, Australia, Italy, and Japan. We need to have 8 decades, and I actually have from the 1920s to the 2020s. So not one in every decade, but I have like 9 decades covered. We need 2 insect-centered films. So I've picked a movie called The Nest, which is about some cockroaches. I think this was from the 70s. And then there's a more modern movie called Insect, literally called Insect. There was some question on whether spiders and all that were insects and they're arachnids, not insects. So he said insect, not bugs. So I had to switch them. I had a spider movie and I had to switch it out. So that's those. I needed 1 horror movie set in space or the future. So I picked Galaxy of Terror. I think that's supposed to be I don't want to say good, but fun. You know, it's supposed to be a fun movie. I think Roger Corman was producing that. We needed 2 animated films, so I picked The Adventures of Ichabod and Mr. Toad. This one's from the 40s, and somehow it's a Disney horror cartoon. So, all right, I'll check that out. And then there's Mad God, which is on Shudder. I believe it came out this year or last year, and it's gotten high reviews. Put that on my list. Thought, well, that's a no-brainer. I needed this movie. I needed 1 bloodthirsty old person or people film. And I found this movie called The Brotherhood of Satan, which is something from like the 70s about some elderly group of people that like uses the kids in the town or something to worship Satan, or I don't know, whatever. It sounded cool. I thought, all right, I'll chuck that on there. I needed 2 1970s regional US films. So the first one I picked were Children Shouldn't Play with Dead Things, which I know the name. I believe it's a horror comedy. I don't know what it's about, but I know the name. So somewhere along the line, I've heard of it before because it sounded familiar. So I tossed that on the list. And then there's a movie called Effects, which looks like some video game I've been playing recently. The next one I needed was the worst horror sequel from the 90s that you haven't seen and can access. So I picked Warlock 3. I was thinking about one of the Children of the Corn sequels, but for some reason I ended up moving those. I think the 90s, one of the ones from the Children of the Corn to get in the 90s was like the 4th or 5th film. So I'd have to watch a whole bunch of them. I've only ever seen the first. With Warlock 3, I have seen the first. I've not seen the second. So I'm going to try to get the first and second in and then watch the third, just to refresh myself on the whole thing. But it's supposedly pretty bad. I like the first one. We'll see. I needed 1 German silent film, so I picked The Hands of Orlac. This is an old 1920s black and white silent film, so that's going to be rough, and I usually start with the oldest films and work my way forward. And this year I'm starting with 2 silent films. So this might be rough. I may split things up and go a different direction. I don't know. Now, there's 6 directors listed here, but we need 5 films from these 6 directors in whatever combination. And the word Cronenberg was used. It didn't mention father or son, but I picked one of the old man's movies. And I actually picked one movie from each one of these directors. So there's Cronenberg, Ty West, Bill Rebane, Charles B. Pierce, William Greff, and or Joy in Hauk. And like I said, I picked one from each one. For Cronenberg, I picked Crimes of the Future, which is a this year movie, 2022. I picked Ty West, The Sacrament. Now, he's got a movie called X that's out right now, or has been out this year. I intentionally chose The Sacrament because it's supposed to be more about like the Jonestown thing. So I was kind of interested in that. For Bill Rebane, I picked a movie called Blood Harvest. For Charles B. Pierce, I picked a movie called The Town That Dreaded Sundown, which I've seen the remake or whatever the other one. There's 2 of them by the same name. This is the older one. I've seen the newer one. William Greff. I picked a movie of his called Mako, The Jaws of Death. I'm always down for some oceanic horror movies or water-based horror movies. And then the Joy and Hauk movie, I picked The Night of Bloody Horror. And some of these directors I've never heard of. I don't necessarily know their work. So it'll be interesting to see how they go. We needed 2 Christopher Lee films, so I picked Scream and Scream Again, and then a movie called Deathline, which is something about a murderer in a subway. Sounds cool. And then we needed one film with a musician or band in it, so this was a no-brainer. I've been wanting to see that movie that the Foo Fighters made called Studio 666, so that one's on my list. We needed a Stephen King adaptation that is not the first go-around, meaning Pet Sematary, it got remade into a newer one. It got remade. And the one that I picked is Children of the Corn, which is the 2009 or something like that remake. It's the newest version of the Children of the Corn. I had to actually buy this one on Blu-ray because it was just not available to rent. We needed a Lon Chaney film. So this is my second silent 1920s film, and this is Phantom of the Opera. I think this is like the big classic version of it or something, like one of the other. It's not the 30s version, but the older classic version, I guess. There's like a whole ton of Phantom of the Opera versions. And there's always a Tobe Hooper film. This list is called, this marathon, or this particular list for the marathon, is called Hooptober, and that comes from Tobe Hooper and October, mixing those together. So I picked a movie called Mortuary. I have seen pretty much all of Hooper's films, aside from Mortuary and Gin, maybe 1 or 2 others, but I've watched most of his stuff, so pretty soon I'm going to be rotating probably Texas Chainsaw and that Funhouse. Those 2 will probably be going over. Those are the 2 I really like. The rest are kind of not that great. So that actually fills all of the criteria on the list, aside from 2 movies that I picked for their country. And that one is an Australian film called Fair Game. This looked really cool. It's been on my list for a long time to watch, but I just haven't got there yet. And it seems like I needed one to fill in. I thought, all right, I'll pick that one and fill it in. And then from Japan, I picked a Takashi Miike film, As the Gods Will. Miike films are crazy. I don't necessarily like all of them that I've watched. They're not horrible. They're not bad or anything. They're just, I don't know, they're not quite my cup of tea. But the dude's always got some really whacked out ideas, so I threw it on my list. That is going to be on there. And from there on, that I believe leaves me with 7 spots open. So I'm going to pick some other things to fill in there. I just haven't filled in my list yet. For extra credit, we were given The Last Circus, Silent Madness, and Pennywise, The Story of It on Screambox. So if I get time, I'll be watching those. As mentioned, this is not a full list of 31 yet, but I have met all of the criteria. The next month or so looks stacked with theatrical releases like Halloween Ends, Smile, Barbarian, The Menu, and Terrifier 2. Nope and Ty West's X are out for rental, so I plan to see quite a few new releases soon. I just need to see where they are here locally. Some things aren't available for rent yet, or purchase, or whatever, or they're not in theater. Typically, I use Shudder and Amazon Prime for streaming, and then Google Play, Vudu, or Amazon for purchases or rentals. If I can't find something in all that, I buy a Blu-ray or DVD, but really only use that as a last resort. This year, we have a free month of Screambox, promo code Hooptober, so we'll see how that service is compared to Shudder, and fill in a few from there probably. I have not even checked Screambox out yet. I love Shudder though, so we'll see. One difficulty that tends to come up with streaming is availability. Either not being able to watch something at all, it's hard to find like that Children of the Corn movie I was wanting, or that a service will drop a movie right before October, so the list may change accordingly. Always have that caveat. To track my movies, I use Letterboxd and will link this year's list in the description. And finally, I hope you're along for the ride because I will be doing a weekly recap video until the marathon is over. So that will do it for this one. Take care.